What if every experience, every hardship, every obstacle was given to you, not to break you, but to mold you and strengthen you? What if the center of your suffering was actually the key to ultimate health? And what if your own pain was meant to be the catalyst for your greatest purpose? Welcome to Buddha Belly Life, empowering purpose, mind to microbiome. Welcome to the Buddha Belly Life podcast. And today I am so excited to be joined by Dr. Ivanina. She is an integrative gastroenterologist, you guys. And I know that we hear a lot about GI doctors and gastroenterologists, but I want you to remember, and those in my holistic community, you guys know that integrative means root. It means more holistic. It means honestly so much more thorough. So today we are so excited. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Ivanina.
Thank you so much for having me, Brittany. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, this is so cool. I'm so glad I found you. If you guys, and I'm going to put her content in the bio of the podcast, and she's easy to find too, especially on Instagram, but she just spits out these little tidbits of information that are just so advanced. And that's what I love about you, your stuff. I was like, yes, this is amazing. This is amazing. So can you give us a little bit of your backstory of how you took this direction with life, how you got involved in essentially holistic medicine and GI specific? And, do you have a story or anything that played into what kind of brought you here?
Yeah. So my story begins with kind of a shout out to my mom and respect for kind of my family values when I was growing up. So my family came from Russia, kind of grew up eating off the land. And so they preserved that when they were raising me here. And, it's interesting as when I grew up, I was not exposed to many antibiotics. Everything was very very conservative as far as that goes, medications, right? And just a lot of really good food. And then when I started going to my friends' houses when I was older, and I would be like, oh, what is this like fancy thing in a bag, right? Like fun, colorful food. I would have like stomach problems. And I was just like, wow, it was so clear to me. Like there was such a difference, right? In how you were eating as you were growing up. And how then if you took those things away, then, people would feel so much better, right? Took away so many of these things we have in our Western diet and lifestyle. So then when I knew I was in medicine and deciding what I wanted to go into, I kind of understood from my upbringing and my experiences that I wanted gastroenterology to be my focus. I love it because gastroenterology as a field combines, the intellectual piece of it, like educational pieces, like understanding the gut, the physiology, how it works, and using food, right? And supplements and herbs and medications when needed to treat it. But it also has that hands-on, endoscopy and colonoscopy. So I'm actually like in your gut, like seeing what's going on, taking biopsies, looking under a microscope, aspirating fluid to grow different organisms for SIBO and SIFO, right? Fungal organisms. And so to me, it was just such a clear, obvious answer. It was so fascinating and, involves the microbiome, which is like the cutting edge, most fascinating part of medicine and health to me that I think actually puts everything together. So that's how I kind of wound up in GI, having a more holistic approach that also came from going to an osteopathic school. So it was, the teaching is a lot about the body has the power and the ability to heal itself, right? That is like one of the underlying tenets. The body is so powerful. And so we need to harness that, right? Like it's not going to go on for too long, but one of my favorite thoughts about that is Ozempic, right? Ozempic is a GLP-1 agonist. What's GLP-1? That is your body's peptide. That's not something magical that, Ozempic is doing. It's working with what you already have in your body that you can harness, right? So again, it's like the power of your own body to heal. So that is my story and how I ended up where I am.
That's so cool. And I think it's actually really interesting that you talk about that, especially like with the Russian community, because where I grew up, like we had more of a Russian community. and in the Northwest. And I would pay attention. Like I remember my mom, she was in the area of work she did, she worked with quite a few in the Russian community. And she would say like their diet, I mean, it's so whole foody. I mean, it really is. And they're like, they had these staples like borscht and stuff like that, that were really, really healthy. And then I would notice too, even going on later, and I remember doing a wedding once for a family, and they were a Russian family, and they were really well off. They had this super big fancy house. I had never seen a house like this at 21 years old. And I went to go do an on-site wedding hair because I was a hairdresser at the time. And same thing, they were still, even here and doing whatever, they were still making some of these same traditional on the wedding day. They were bringing each other like borscht and things like that. And I was like, wow. And their skin was always so nice. And I would notice that at the beach and everything. I would just notice that even for being lighter complected, which we don't always, if we're lighter complected, we don't always have height as much as well. We're not so blessed. But I would be at the beach and I would see some of the Russian families. And even if you saw a woman, which is superficial as it sounds, that had maybe a little more weight on her, her skin still just looked so much nicer. Like they didn't have all the cellulite and things that so many of us struggled with, that I had it in 5th grade even, and I always made that correlation. And I do feel like what you said, that some of those just really traditional foods have kept in the diet for so long too, and it just goes to show how powerful and healthy it is for you.
Absolutely, Brittany. It's all the lots of garlic, right? Lots of garlic. They're all about a piece of like really black bread, right? None of this white bread. It's black bread, garlic, and then like a piece, and then herbs, right? Like fresh herbs. And then, your nice bowl of borscht, which, typically is meat based, but you can also make it without meat, and just tons of cabbage and beets and things like that.
Beets. Yeah. Yes, the beets. Like, and that's it too. So it's like, wow, I know. So that's just a little side tangent, a little bit. But can you give me some information? Okay. Because this is how I love when you are digging into this stuff. And when you talk about being a gastroenterologist and the way you practice, it's really interesting because I think a lot of people, their experiences with traditional GI doctors is, and this is a lot of the people I've seen, they say, I go in, they do whatever. And then usually it's like they scope me and then they send me home telling me either nothing's wrong with me or that I have IBS. And this is happening every single day. So how did you get to a point where you saw beyond that and to dig more into the nutrition and the microbiome integrity and the ecosystem in there?
Yeah, Brittany, GI docs do have a bad reputation, as do a lot of just general Western, right? Like the Western medical system. It's very broken, right? I mean, I think we've known that for a really long time. And so when you go to see a standard gastroenterologist, it is very much within that health system that also includes insurance and what insurance pays for. So you usually get your maybe 20-minute new patient visit where you talk about 3 things, right? And then, people don't have time to even talk to you, right? So that's why it's kind of like, let's do ABC and we'll give you that PPI and that's it, right? Like there's no time to dig deeper. And I'll tell you, like I had a totally traditional GI fellowship in New York City. I loved every minute of it. I loved who I trained with. I loved, my mentors, but, something was missing. So like, for example, everyone I worked with was amazing. They were amazing at finding cancer. I mean, like that's one of the key, jobs of a gastroenterologist, and this is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month, is to find colon cancer because it is like one of the number one preventable cancers, right? Especially when found early, it's so much easier to treat. So so when you think about like GI, one of the main goals is to find cancer, make sure there is no cancer and, be a part of that, that journey. And the other one is to find something like IBD, right? Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, because of that high morbidity and mortality, right? Like those are really dangerous, conditions that can require surgery, that can require being in the ICU. They're very, very, it's obviously a spectrum. Not everybody has that experience with IBD. But in general, that's the thought is like GI has traditionally been a field that is looking for these very, very serious things. And they're really good at it, right? And that's why it's like endoscopy, colonoscopy, some limited labs that will look for those things. But I found that when I completed that training, which again is so important, there is the whole other section of
preventative too.
That we're not getting an answer. Okay, great. I don't have cancer. Thank goodness. Oh my goodness. That's great news. And I might not have Crohn's or colitis, but then what do I have? I'm struggling every day. I've changed my social life. I can't wear the same clothes. Like I'm struggling with anxiety, depression, food restrictions, right? So many things and I don't have IBS is not an answer.
Exactly.
Right. And
it's like when you say a baby has colic. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
What does that mean?
Do you have a desire for fulfillment? Does helping people tap into their own health mentally, emotionally, and physically fire you up? Do you believe in the impact of the gut microbiome on overall wellness? You may be an HWCA coach. For more info on our cutting-edge health coach trainings, visit hwcacoach.com.
So that was when I started practicing as part of, I stayed, I basically stayed on where I trained because I had a great group of colleagues. It was a great place. But I soon found that I was at that aspect of it where I was like, okay, I did what I needed to do to make sure you don't have cancer and, anything that's going to affect your, life expectancy very soon. But what can I do for you? And that's when I looked into doing functional medicine training, and, everything like within nutrition, more microbiome, research, all of those things.
And I love that because that gives so much hope. And this is something I always try to drive home for the coaches a bit too, because I feel like working in gut health coaching specifically, we get a lot of people that are desperate and have only just been to these kind of professionals. So the coaches start grappling with stepping outside of their scope of practice or trying to dissect and figure out these people. And I'm like, while I am all about all the information, like take in all the information, I sit through doctor level trainings every single week.
Right.
But it's just so that I can assimilate better and better allocate people and not so that I can jump in and try and do something that I don't need to do. And so this is where like I said, I'm always telling them, you partnering with people like you, if there's more professionals like you, it's so much better because health coaches are in this space that's very necessary. Like you said, in your practice, you're not going to follow up with somebody every single week or multiple times a week and help them with, figuring out their food stuff or digging into, we say life coach first here. So it's a lot of things are in here and they're in here and we're having to just kind of grow through stuff. But what's cool about having the knowledge is that then you can better just, hey, if I were you, maybe I'd connect to this person or this, because most of these people only know that quick, 10-minute, appointment and these procedures, and then they go on their way and they're just on a pharmaceutical, maybe or not.
Yeah.
So what do you have to say? Like, what's your best advice for maybe coaches trying to find their space and work with this? Because what you're talking about is so advanced and I love it. And I get a lot of it. And some of it's very next level. And I wouldn't want to step into that piece. Like that's not our job.
Yeah, no, I mean, you play such a vital role in the journey of health and wellness, right? And I think what can be so vital is, like making those connections and those referrals and understanding where you can send somebody to get those next steps, right? And so again, all my respect and love to the GI community because, they're really good at what they do, but it can be within a very limited scope. So, that evaluation can be absolutely vital to someone's, gut health journey as the first step. And then, for a health coach to be meeting with somebody who's done that and who has not received, any answers that have helped them heal and feel better and understand exactly what's going on with that deep dive. that I think there are, multiple resources, they can use. I think that there are, physicians who are more subspecialized and actually at academic centers. For example, I get a lot of I do educational sessions like around the country, around the world, right? Where people need help, but I'm not able to be their doctor, right? And so I always say, like, let's say because they're suffering from SIBO or from what we think sounds like SIFO or small intestinal fungal overgrowth. And, I'm always with them on the, computer being like, okay, well, where do you live? What, city are you near? Maybe you're near Chicago, and in Chicago, there's University of Chicago. University of Chicago has a great neurogastroenterology and motility subsection of their department. And that's what I used to be. I used to be the director of neurogastroenterology and motility at Lenox Hill. And what that means is that you are the subspecialist within gastroenterology that is taking that next step to investigate motility and into SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, like a microbiome issue, pelvic floor, right? And like all these things that, again, a very general gastroenterologist would not necessarily be doing, like out in the community. So that is kind of, I think, one of the most important things is like, where are you? Where are your closest, resources of someone who's very academic, so who understands, and who has access to some of these great tests, right? Because it becomes all about testing. Now, again, you can do that type of testing and perhaps still not receive your answer. And that's where, for example, into my practice, I added things like, microbiome testing, because that was something that was not, a part of academic, the academic workup. So for me, I wanted to be able to have a practice that offered everything, right? So we do the motility testing, we do the we'll help you get the pelvic floor testing done. We'll do everything that type of doctor does in the academic setting, but also the microbiome, like the more functional level. So, perhaps again, there's a functional practitioner near them who has access to these types of tests, who can then give them a deep dive more in that functional route, which the academic gastroenterologist may not be able to. So sometimes it's, you might need multiple people on your team, and that usually is really key, right? Health coach, nutritionist, gastroenterologist, and perhaps a functional medicine doctor as well.
Yep. And I thank you for saying it that way too, because you're echoing what I'm always preaching to them. Like, hey guys, and we always say, you are your own best practitioner. And at the end of the day, the individual in their own body, because anybody that works with you they only can bring so much to the table, but you've got to be able to choose who you allow in, what you decide to do. Sometimes you get mixed information. I mean, it's really going to come down to you anyway. And so empowering people in just opening up to that and not just handing it off. But I love that you said, because and ultimately, and this is where I think coaches can get a little confused, and I'm just going to reiterate what this means to me, is that even if I have a certain level of skill in certain things, or I think this or that, to send someone to someone so much more thorough, I feel like they can do it faster. Even if you think there's a level of certain things that you could do to bring another person in, like I always say, like a functional medicine doctor, somebody that's good at pulling more thorough blood work and tests and options. Not only is it for your liability, but you're going to get some more thorough information that's going to allow you to work better as a coach. So if I know someone's severely anemic and I know that they're struggling with their thyroid, you know what I mean? We're going to talk about a lot of nervous system calming, which you end up doing with everybody, right? But still, especially for them. And we will rethink that heavy weight training, high cardio routine that they have in their life right now, because things like that. So you're going to get this data that you're not trying to wear all the hats. It's just like in business, like don't try and wear too many hats, bring the right people in it. I think it'll actually make you more professional. This is why I'm speaking to the coaches right now, but it'll make coaches more professional by working with people that are really trustworthy and bring a lot of that value to the table in different professional arenas.
Yeah. Brittany, the communication and relationship between those different people on your team also is so important. I actually have on my team someone who's training to be a health coach. And so they are doing some of their, right? They're doing part of their training with some of my patients who are interested, right, as part of their education. And it's been really amazing because although I do provide a lot more time, I don't do, 20, 30-minute visits. My first initial visit is 75 minutes. But even with a lot of time with a patient, there's still things that the health coach will pick up. And then it's just so beautiful when you can actually talk and have a conversation. If there's anything else, like you just said, like that might be missing, like maybe, the practitioner didn't pick up that they were, doing, high intensity, right, like training, which also may affect the pelvic floor, right? And then, there are these so many details that, again, even in a 75-minute intake, that I try to be so thorough in understanding everything that I think that would contribute to their root cause and understanding where they are today. I still get so much helpful feedback from, the health coach on my team, and having that communication is absolutely key.
Thank you for empowering that, coaches. Yeah. I hope you hear that. You see, there's so much that coaches can bring to the table and make the partnership really great. And then we've broken up the kind of compartmentalization of wellness that happens. Even, obviously in the traditional space, it can happen a lot, but it can happen even in the holistic space a little more too. So one thing that I want to ask you, so you talk a lot about, and this is what I kind of want to give everybody some info on, but you talk a lot about root causation with gut issues. And I think that we look at the gut often just kind of as just more simplistically. So when you're diving in at root cause, what are you seeing more with people? Like what are some of the things at the root that you're finding that are really impacting their ability that, just their diet or certain supplement combinations and stuff aren't able to touch well, or determine a different route for that?
So, gut health is like a bucket, and to understand where someone is and what's going on. And when I talk about root cause, it's usually not, oh, you got that one thing and, and everything, fell apart. It's usually a complex story that has led to something being the final, kind of trigger to then creating chronic gut health issues, right? So everything starts with a history and, family history, birth history, right? Exposure to gut toxins. Most importantly, I would always say is antibiotics, but of course there are things like NSAIDs, alcohol, basically the entire American, process of growing up, right? Tons of antibiotics in the beginning, then tons more antibiotics when you're a teenager and you've got acne and, things like that. Then you're drinking a ton in college and taking NSAIDs the next day because of hangovers. And it really is, it's like all these things are working against us. These are all these obstacles that I'm like, my core mission is to educate, honestly, for people to understand, because it starts so early that these things are just thrown at us like obstacles. They're not all necessary. We can do so much more to minimize them. And then at some point, right, then, usually taking into consideration what your gut health journey has been. And then you go to Mexico and then you catch Montezuma's revenge, right, which is usually an E. coli infection. And that spills the bucket over. And so even
maybe COVID or something.
Definitely COVID. Oh, wow. COVID. I mean, there's no question. COVID it's such a inflammatory condition and it affects the gut so much, the microbiome, leaky gut, mast cells in the wall of the gut. An infection is very often that, what spills the bucket over after having a lot of kind of damage accumulate, but you may be able to recover from because you're young and you're doing other things that may be healthy, right? So, but then there's something usually that spills it over. So when I talk about root cause, first we understand the story. And then we understand what those exposures, infections, what exactly that did to your gut. So that could be, for example, like you mentioned, COVID, it triggered an autoimmune disease, right? Mm-hmm. COVID is very famous for being what we call an epigenetic factor. So it's like maybe in your family you had autoimmune disease, yes, but you never had anything.
Attacking your greatest weaknesses.
Right. It's unfortunately, it's been a really powerful kind of key to turn the autoimmune condition cascade on. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I mean by root cause. It's really both things. It's the history, and then it's understanding what those exposures did to your gut by understanding what's going on in your microbiome, mm-hmm, autoimmune disease, inflammation, and everything else.
Yes. Awesome. Yeah. And what's interesting too, when it comes to some of these things, like I saw you talking today, and I like how you touch on some of this, because there's a lot of common beliefs. Like we were actually just recently talked about FODMAPs, and you're talking about FODMAPs mm-hmm. today, and how mm-hmm. it's so common for people to avoid all FODMAPs. And see, I have a few awesome coaches that have Crohn's, colitis, etc., and they manage it very well themselves. And so they help other people do so. And this fear of FODMAPs, or fear of food, and then we got the psychological part that comes in, is so huge. And they're really struggling with, like, how do we, if you guys don't know what FODMAPs are, those are the like indigestible fibers that really, and honestly, we need them. They're what really feed a lot of our gram-positive bacteria. And so but they can be really reactive if your gut's in a bad state. And so people are told, if they're told they have IBS, which is not a diagnosis, it's not at all. It's like saying a baby has colic, it's saying you have a handful of these symptoms. So therefore we've made a name for these symptoms, and it's not saying what is causing them.
Totally, Brittany. Yeah.
And then they go, okay, go low FODMAP. So they're like, or no FODMAP, right? So pull out these foods. So they start avoiding foods that are so critical to building the microbiome, avoiding them completely and never even knowing how to reintroduce them. And a lot of these people in the Crohn's and colitis community believe that there is no reintroduction. And that's what I've been hearing from my coaches lately. And they've been talking about it on masterminds, is like, what do I do with these people that truly, they don't know anything about this? Like, what's some of your take on these foods when somebody has a condition like that and they're avoiding certain things?
Yeah.
Do you work with them to build things back up? What are you seeing in your practice, especially for things as severe as, Crohn's disease?
Yeah, absolutely. So restrictive diets are a Band-Aid, right? Mm-hmm. There is very rarely a time that being on a restrictive diet will necessarily heal you. Now, I will have a caveat for Crohn's, because that is a very specific condition. But in general, I'm really talking about the low FODMAP diet. Yep. The low FODMAP diet is not a treatment for something that when you stop it, you will magically be fine, right? Yeah. What the low FODMAP diet means is that there's and if you respond to the low FODMAP diet, it really comes down to your microbiome, right? And when we think about what's going on in IBS, right? And what, when they research IBS is so many different things. What IBS really means is it is a disorder of the gut-brain interaction, right? They've actually changed the term. We used to call them functional GI diseases. Now we call them disorders of the gut-brain interaction. IBS is kind of like that, the main one, which is a real issue, right? The gut-brain axis, it's an issue. There are many things that can disrupt normal communication, both from like anxiety and depression causing GI issues, and GI issues causing anxiety, depression, right? So anyway, so the idea is, if someone has told you to be on a low FODMAP diet, number one is it's a very specific diet that you do for up to 6 weeks. And actually it's 2 to 6 weeks. So you may only need 2 weeks of it, right? Mm-hmm. So 2 to 6 weeks, and then you're done. And then you have to bring that food back, and you're supposed to specifically find the triggers that may be bothering you, a fructan like wheat, or, fructose like honey, right? So there might be something that for some reason is bothering you at that time. But if it's, and that can also actually give you a clue that may be more important, like fructose malabsorption, right? So if you do this diet and you find out it's like all the fructose categories are really bothering you, then again, why would you be so intolerant to this one category? So it can help you as a tool used in the right way with people who are knowledgeable about it to perhaps shed some light on your, on your issues. Also, for example, if, then you find out wheat is your main issue, or you might find out dairy, right? Like, so there are ways that you could use it. But like you said, most people are told, oh, go low FODMAP. And that is it. And you're like, okay, then you look and it's like, okay, I can have 10 almonds and a quarter of an avocado. And then, right. And then like from there
none.
on,
I can't eat these foods. These are high FODMAP foods. I don't touch them.
Right. Which is absolutely the wrong way to do it. Right. That's what people do. They're just like high and low. And I only do the low, right? Foods. So basically the way that you have to think about it is that when you're starving your microbiome of all these foods, there are certain bugs in your microbiome that are dying. They're not being fed, right? So your microbiome is being depleted. And there are actually studies that have come out saying, like, if you are stuck on a prolonged low FODMAP diet, like, you need to be supporting your gut with prebiotics, like fiber supplements, because you are depleting your microbiome. And that is the key to good health, right? In so many different ways. So again, in general, again, it could be helpful in very specific ways, but you have to be so limited in the restrictive piece. And then, moving on to reintroductions, with, again, someone who's knowledgeable about it. Now, Crohn's, it's interesting that people even say to do low FODMAP for Crohn's, because in general, it's not really studied for Crohn's. It's studied for diarrhea, gas, and bloating, right? IBS. Right? That's kind of like what it's been studied for. So kind of more for symptoms, just like we talked about. IBS is like a list of symptoms. Well, low FODMAP seems to help with those symptoms. So again, like totally doesn't make sense with root cause, but fine. Could be helpful in some ways. But with Crohn's, Crohn's is a condition where the microbiome piece is so key, right? Crohn's is a inflammatory condition that even years before you have ulcers and the Crohn's has become a condition, they see leaky gut, they see, issues with the microbiome. So it's like this slow growing condition that really does start in your microbiome, your gut, your exposures, your food, and everything. So then when people do have Crohn's, for certain types of Crohn's, food is absolutely actually a treatment for Crohn's. But, it's very restrictive that you need to do with a nutritionist for, again, only a certain amount of time. But in that case, it is actually a treatment.
And what do you say? Because when you said, restrictive diets aren't, where they're at, right? Do you consider, because this is what I feel like most people hear, do you consider whole foods a restrictive diet? Because I feel like a lot of our population does. I feel like when they hear, we don't want to be in a restrictive diet for too long. Like, I think I know what you mean by that, but I think a lot of people think, restrictive is, having to eat these whole foods all day, every day, most days. Like, that's really restrictive because it feels restrictive to them. What's your 2 cents on that?
Yeah, Brittany, you're totally right. It's like, it's relative, right? To what is normal to you. So if you grow up going to McDonald's once in a while or, eating packaged food as a majority of your kind of calories, then to you, switching to all these plants and, kind of organic and, pasture fed, animal products and all those things like may seem like such a big switch that it almost is restrictive if you're continuing it, right? Like, and you've taken away what you know to be normal. But even again, if you're saying the restrictions are to restrict dairy or, all these things, gluten, like they're so ingrained in our food culture. So what I really, what it really comes down to is, other than if you have specific reasons you have to avoid something, like, of course, if there's celiac disease and you just have to avoid gluten, you have to 110%, right? Because in the long run, it can cause lymphoma if you are, introducing gluten, if you have celiac. So and of course there are food allergies, right? So there are certain places where there is really no wiggle room with a certain dietary restriction. But in most places there is some wiggle room, especially in the kind of long-term recommendations, right? So let's say you find that person who has non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and that's all you're talking about is gluten, but gluten is a big restriction for a lot of people, right? Soy sauce, right? Like all these things that you didn't even think of when you were like, oh, I'm going to go gluten-free and no bread, no pasta, right? And then all of a sudden it's everything. It's like, wow, no, I can't eat like a ton of food. So, for those people where, again, introducing it sometimes would not cause a detrimental, issue to their health. I do believe in like some kind of, healthy 80-20 balance, right? That if you go out with your friends on the weekend and you want to be a part of this social experience and not just be like, oh, okay, I'm going to order gluten-free, dairy-free, seed oil-free, and, everything else. If eating those things will not be detrimental to your body at that time, like I mentioned with the other things like allergies and such, then I do believe people need to be able to feel like they're part of, a community and have their social life and be able to let go of the reins. And if they need to use a little bit of digestive enzymes, FODzyme, right? All of these things. And maybe afterwards a little peppermint oil, or fennel oil to soothe the gut, because it might obviously cause a little bit of bloating or something, but in the long run, you don't want your mental health to suffer from your dietary restrictions. So that's why, for me, a restrictive diet is very relative to what you're normally eating or what your society, what your friends, what your family are eating around you that you're surrounded with. And then, how you deal with that is understanding what's going on and having a little wiggle room.
Yeah, that's great input. And I think that it helps too if we do have periods where we do want to investigate how our body is, where we are kind of cleansing away from, I get through Christmas and I eat pretty clean, but I eat more junk in the 2 weeks of Christmas. Like, I've eaten a lot more cheese and like sugar and stuff that just normally I'm not going to eat a lot. And I feel like garbage. So we know what our bodies tell us, and our bodies are saying like, hey, get it together, but to not have the black and white polarity of, okay, that me, kind of detoxing and really focusing on just these foods, or even doing some kind of a removal protocol for purposes to investigate and get to know kind of my triggers and my body's responses at this state and time. There's a time I responded really bad to peanuts, and I would have never known unless I did that. But I don't always respond bad to peanuts. But at this point in time, I was pregnant. That's where my gut was at. And that's what was happening. And it was giving me heart palpitations.
Wow.
So I wanted to know that, but at the same time, not to think that like it's black or white, like this is the optimal way. And then either I'm on the train or I'm not on the train, and always working back to here and get more comfortable in maintenance, which is kind of like what I see some of the trainers now talk about with physical fitness and stuff. They really talk about, hey, everybody's looking at like how to cut down and lean out here. And we're always in a lost state, then it can really mess with us. And say that there's a really important thing about finding a healthy maintenance majority of the time. And I think this is probably true for our eating habits and our lifestyle too. And maybe we could nudge that in a healthier direction than the standard American diet too.
Yeah, you're totally right. So, and that's where, again, it's like the root cause, and some of these eliminations can help if done very meticulously, but again, in a time sensitive way. And then you understand that there are some foods that irritate your gut. And so then the most beautiful thing is when you are enlightened to exactly what's going on in your gut, and then you feel like you're in control. Because that is what most people lose when they have gut issues. It is like, I don't even know what's setting off my gut. I don't know what's happening in my gut. And there's fear and there's loss of control of like, what is going on in this whole tube that goes through me. And so I think that, we're kind of aligned in this thought of, if you get your root cause and you go through these steps to really understand what's happening, and if there are specific food sensitivities, food intolerances, what are they? And again, if they're not an allergy or not something dangerous, then in the maintenance phase, after you've understood your body and you're able to take it to a place where you feel better and you feel really good and you're in control, then if you want to have exposure to those things in some way that will keep you like mentally happy and again socially fulfilled, right? That I think it might
actually help you balance it out.
Yeah.
and not be so extreme and not actually just, be on or off. Right. Yeah,
absolutely. That's what's going on. And like, especially in the world of social media where everyone's like trying to get their, their I don't know, reel to become, like trending,
viral,
viral. Exactly. Right. So it's like, what can I say? Oh, seed oils are so bad. They're going to cause you a heart attack tomorrow. Like, what can I say that's going to, give my message like a lot of emphasis. Right. And a lot of times, like you just said, it's too extreme and it's not applicable to everyone to then come up with a list of like no seed oils, no gluten, no dairy, no nightshades, no, like if you talk about what everyone is telling you to avoid, it's a scary world out there on social media. It is.
I know. And how often do you think that do you have anything that you feel like are one size fits all for everybody? Because I don't think it exists very much. I know I run into this a lot when I'm coaching people, like especially on the topics of like fasting and stuff like that, because I'm like, especially like, cause most of those studies were done on men, and we know women, like we have so much hormonal sensitivity and fluctuation depending on where your gut is, what your blood sugar levels are currently like, where your body's at right now. It may not be a great thing for you. Everybody's trying to figure out how to heal themselves through whatever kind of, thing that they hear should be done for everybody. And do you have anything that you feel like should be done, or do you like, what's your opinion?
Yeah, I think I very much agree with you. It's like, we are such different people. Like each one of us have had unique exposures. We have completely unique microbiomes, right? Even though there is like a general trend, but like, we're so unique in what is going on in each of our bodies that there really is no one size fits all. There's no, what probiotic should I take because that's good for me, right? That's
what exercise should I do?
What exercise, right? Is it like if I'm on, intermittent fasting, I'm doing HIIT and yoga, and then I'm gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, like, is that good for everybody? Absolutely not, right? Like, what if you've had an eating disorder? Then, intermittent fasting is not healthy, most likely, and it can be very triggering, right? Intermittent fasting can increase cortisol levels, right? So
that's what I ran into with it, because I have 6 kids between 3 and 13.
Wow.
My cortisol had enough going on with it. And so I learned that because I would do intermittent fasting, then I would wake up and I would do my fasted HIIT. And let me tell you, this was an absolute WWF beatdown to my adrenals. And I was trying to ignore my body because I was trying to follow what was supposed to be the best on paper.
You're so right. You're so right.
Silly.
Yeah. It's very, it's like very mean to your body to like put it through so much, right? Like, so you kind of like, you have to be kind, you have to be gentle, and you have to like listen, because absolutely, people of course can try these things because the recommendations are being made and they're in your face all the time. But for most people, you really should have a good core team of people helping guide you, even if it's for prevention and optimization, right? Even if you don't have a specific symptom you're trying to understand and you're just trying to be better and be healthier, then you really need a team to understand how that happens for you.
And I think that is the best punctuation for this podcast, because that's exactly what I think the greatest message is that we spend so much time thinking about our bodies, but not actually listening to our own bodies, to get out of our heads a little more, learn so that we can hear our own bodies, not learn so that we can implement somebody else's strategy or thing, but actually start listening to our own bodies and start bringing in the right people, the right things. Like in my wellness circle, I don't just have a functional medicine doctor and a chiropractor. I have a counselor, and I have multiple people that do different therapies and stuff that I needed from my life, from my background, and from my struggles. And to dig into that is a very spiritual experience, honestly, because it brings out so much of us, really, when we have to figure out our bodies. And so I feel like what you're saying is absolutely perfect, to stop trying to duplicate someone else's process and instead build your own team to start nurturing and digging into your own body and listening to your own body and making your own routines and your own needs and your things like that. That's amazing.
And what you just said, Brittany, I think that when resonated with me, nurturing and nourishment, right? Like those are two words that I would say that if I was to say everyone needs to do this, like think about what nurtures and nourishes you, because that should be the goal. It shouldn't be, again, to, I don't know, like necessarily, cut bloating by tomorrow, like you need to have goals, but while you are on your journey, you need to be nurtured and nourished.
Yeah.
Or else it's not going to be successful. It's not going to be long lasting, and it might actually be dangerous or
counterintuitive, like my AM hit while breastfeeding and raising 6 children and intermittent fasting. Like, really, what was I thinking?
You're like a powerhouse. Oh my gosh, for being able to even do that in the first place. Wow.
Well, it comes at a cost, and then you got to relearn, and that's what we're always learning more, relearning. So, Dr. Ivanina, where can everyone find you? Definitely give them your Instagram handle, you guys. It's easy to find. I'm going to put it in the notes too, but it's just great for spitfiring information. But where can we find your content and more of the value that you're sharing? Because I think honestly, more of the professionals, we need more people like you too, that have the medical training, but that are now merging in and that understand working with a team and that are going farther than just diagnostics and pharmaceuticals. So where can we find you?
So the best place is definitely on Instagram. So my handle is at gut_love. And so I really just have that as my primary kind of educational platform. Mm-hmm. I have a website, www.gutlove.com, which is, it has some information on it, and I'm actually building it out. So it's in the works of being a more enriched platform. And to your point and to what I've been hearing from people who, right, obviously, like I said before, if someone lives near a city, great, then you see the subspecialist, or, you have maybe more resources. But for all those people who don't, right, like I want to increase the level of resources I can provide. I'm a yoga instructor, so like yoga for the gut, right? Or like even just, again, more like SIBO 101. What is it, right? Like, what is it if it's IBS? If you're told it's IBS, like this is what you should do with, and just give this to your local doctor, right? Mm-hmm. Whoever they are, so that, and most doctors are really open to it, because in the end, they're there to help you feel better. So that's the website, but really it's through Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Ivanina. Thank you for the work you're doing, and thank you for contributing to our community today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Brittany. It was so great to be on.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us for another empowering episode of Buddha Belly Life. For more information on gut health and mindset resources, visit buddhabellylife.com. And remember, heal yourself and then empower others to do the same.